So we have The Horsemen, one of John Frankenheimer's, perhaps a lesser known film from Frankenheimer's oeuvre, although one of the more technically impressive, we could argue. Long sweeping shots, these what appear to be helicopter photography. It's a grand sweeping piece of work. Perhaps we could argue the drama leaves something to be desired, or it seems to exist as this median mood of those, from my perspective, and this is totally a retrospective, um, kind of hindsight analysis, born of memory, but when these films were playing out on television in the daytime of ad breaks, these sorts of epic films, period pieces, big name actors, these like very pretty leading ladies who look like they've still been very made up and manicured in the desert. They're these remarkable. There's a tone about them wherein they become kind of what was the word? Kind of tasteful and reverent and kind of stoically grandiose in their own right. You accept that it's convincing drama because the fact that it's convincing drama is kind of already assumed, you know. At that time in your life, perhaps there's no expectation that you're to be critical or have to be sold on whether the drama is effective. It simply is, and you watch it play out as though it's this reverent, exalted classic of some kind. You know, they speak in, you know, the way actors spoke in these older Hollywood dramas was a bit more stiff, but it was closer to a sort of there's a certain idealized melodrama which a lot of these films, given that film drama absolutely saw itself as heir to stage drama at that time, they really had that sort of tone about their proceedings. The Horsemen can certainly make a case for the importance, the prominence of the choice of director on the outcome of a film's production. It's difficult to imagine, let's just throw out some names. Don Siegel's The Horsemen. How about John Borman's The Horsemen? That might be pretty cool, to be fair. Let's go, well, what if one of our Italian friends, like Antonio Margheriti, had been handled The Horsemen? I'm naming out people, the people who come to my mind are necessarily people I like, and they might have done an interesting job. Siegel was better in smaller productions, we could say. The film he directed that year was obviously Dirty Harry, but I was also thinking of The Beguiled desert kind of more set film, which is very effective, but again, kind of small scale. Dirty Harry is larger scale, but not quite. The Horsemen, obviously. Someone like Frankenheimer had the know-how of working with Grand Prix and then the more intimate dramas from his television work and some of the early features, theatrical. They coalesced into a really able and appropriate picture, and he's setting his drama in a area at Afghanistan prior to the violence which begun in 1978 and hasn't appeared to have subsided since then, unfortunately. It's a fascinating window into perhaps a bit oriental for some tastes. I'm not, someone else can be the judge of that perhaps, but it's nevertheless one of the more interesting exercises, I think, of a Western director handling their material as though it were Western, you know, English language speaking material within another culture entirely. It can be seen as condescending or it could be seen as empowering, maybe a mixture of both. I think it winds down in a really effective experiment in photographing film drama amongst very gripping and kind of captivating landscapes which extenuate the potential richness of the drama. Shot on location in Afghanistan and also in Spain, The Horseman is another example of Frankenheimer, who didn't necessarily think of film as superior to literature or the stage. He nevertheless delivers an intrinsic argument for this being the case. Film supremacy, essentially, with The Horseman. It's unstageable drama, and it exists on a plane wherein I think he's at the core of his films, he wants to extenuate the human drama as though it were a stage production. Even in The Manchurian Candidate, it falls back on Angela Lansbury's relationship with her son, rather than the set pieces, as say in Hitchcock's North by Northwest is fundamentally the set pieces and even the the relationship is not one of romance so much as it was one of kind of adventurous, kind of risky lust, between Cary Grant and Eva Marie Saint. Anyway, we could argue about that perhaps. We be fun actually. No, seriously, the Horseman, it does, perhaps it's anchored negatively by the extenuation of Frankenheimer's idea of substance, dry human drama, or sometimes dryly executed, perhaps, we could say, as opposed to being completely style over substance. It's not quite the magnificence of Lawrence of Arabia, although in terms of some kind of vaguely jealous imitation, The Horseman I think is quite solid, and one of Frankenheimer's better works, we could argue.